I want to just, I don't know if there's been a chance for reflection on Elections Canada's behalf, but last week I'd asked several questions about the new nature of this, particularly with the role of scrutineers in the interactions and the uniqueness of polling stations in long-term care settings and the assistance of electors in casting their ballot being one of a particular concern and a major change. Has there been any more thought from Elections Canada? I know it's only been a few days, but I do think this is important for us to perhaps have some assurances on, is the collection of data or statistics on the number of individuals in long-term care settings that were assisted and the number of individuals that did help. So for an example, one staff member assisted 34 electors casting a ballot at a long-term care home. Is there a way or a commitment of some sort that when we're looking at this, the reason I ask is after every general election, actually after every by-election, I believe, really, we get a report from Elections Canada. They are very insightful and help us with legislative and policy changes. Is there an ability or a way that Elections Canada can tell us that they'll be able to collect that information and share that in something like the report that comes back to us?
Thank you for the question. I don't have further information from what was shared on Tuesday, other than to say it is, well, there is a newness element to this provision. It is something that happens right now, but I understand you're saying that you would like better reporting, and I mean that is something I will take back and we'll have a chance to reflect on before the next election. I don't see any operational difficulties at this point for that. In fact, I suspect that information is already collected, but to be honest, I don't have an answer on the operational aspects of that right now.
I appreciate that. And the reason I keep mentioning it proactively is I think some sort of instruction has to be set up that this is a statistic for those working at a poll in a long-term care setting will need to track in one way. So the individual that assists an elector has to do an oath or a declaration. Is it for each individual they assist? How does that work? Is it one where they can go in a long-term care setting? For an example, if I was a dietary aide at long-term care residence and was asked that day, could you go around and see who would like to help and vote? Do I do a declaration for each individual one? Is that logged? And I want to just give a bit more context to say, well, why are you kind of adamant or asking about this? And I don't want to be seen as not wanting to ensure that every elector in a long-term care residence is afforded the opportunity to vote. That is key and is important. But I want to make sure that it's not prone to abuse where all of a sudden we do see individuals helping 20, 30, 40, 50 people at a polling station where last time around there was 14 people that voted. Not to say it wouldn't be a success because they were asked. I just want to make sure we have some guardrails and statistics to see and perhaps raise any concerns on that. So I'll ask again, maybe to summarize my question, is there a written oath or a written documentation for each time one person helps? And is there a way to log that through the paperwork that you'll have at a polling station, a long-term care polling station?
There is a written document that is signed by the elector who's assisting another elector. The only circumstance right now where an elector can assist another elector is if it's their relative or a family member. So in other cases, which as we've talked about right now is limited to people who are referred to as friends, are only permitted to assist a single other elector. If a person came in as a family member at two different times, they would, I am sure, be asked to fill out two different forms as an assistant. If it was a person at a polling place with two elderly parents, for example, I suspect that they may only be asked to fill out one form. I don't have a certain answer on that. I'm just sort of like responding in a practical sense. If these amendments were to change, you're correct that a person at a long-term care home facility could potentially assist more than one elector, and we would have to ensure that proper controls and records are maintained. And I take your question to be along those lines and emphasizing the need for those controls and records. And absolutely, that would be something we would do. How specifically we would achieve that, I'm hesitant to say at this stage.
I appreciate that, and I'll malign myself here a little bit if I could, not to give an example, but I'll use myself as a party representative candidate on the ballot. In theory, the way the rules change in long-term care homes, it's not just a staff member at a long-term care. Any elector can assist someone at a polling, and multiple electors. So in theory, myself, a campaign representative, could go to the long-term care home and go door to door during that in the building during the time that up to 12 hours that a polling location may be there on a certain day or days, and go and say, okay, I've got 14 people that would like to vote. I sign 14 pieces of paper, and I can go back and help those 14 people. So it's not just in long-term care settings where it is staff that are within a polling station or at a long-term care home. In theory, anyone in this room could go in and help multiple electors. That's quite a guardrail removal, correct?
It is any person could. You are correct. I in the particular instance of a long-term care home, I see your point about scrutineers, and it is true that this would allow any person to assist multiple electors. And again, I think that's you're absolutely right to raise the need for record keeping and other guardrails around that.
Just in response to follow up to that, is there any restrictions on a candidate or a campaign's representative from doing that? Would a scrutineer, if I signed in and say Mr. Calkins beside me came out to help me in Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry, thank you, would be always appreciated and welcome. But if he went as the scrutineer at the polling location at a long-term care location, he may be busy as well in Red Deer, but I'll just continue to use colleagues nearby me as some examples. But is there any restrictions on candidates or campaign representatives from using that and doing that either at a long-term care setting or at an election a regular or advanced poll location? And where I'm going with this, as you look to this, is it could be prone to abuse, of where campaign representatives could go in and for 15 people say, I'm here to assist an elector, walk in, sign the oath, and go back into the back with them by the ballot box, and just make sure they know that if make sure they cast their. I could. Mr. Duncan, make sure that Mr. Knight that needs help, just, oh, yep, casted the right ballot in the right spot there, and off you go in an unlimited number.
Yeah, and thank you for allowing me to take the time to check. There's no restriction on somebody, whether they're a candidate representative or someone else assisting more than one elector. Although, obviously, under the current law, it's only family members. Yeah.
Well, I would suggest through the chair that this is something that I think needs further clarification or perhaps oversight on for political party representatives as an elector being eligible to go and assist multiple people at a long-term care location, or frankly, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I will keep to clause 2, but in a long-term care setting, this could be prone to abuse, of where a representative as a scrutineer, a campaign volunteer could be going door to door and assisting electors in a way. So is there any safeguards that you can provide some assurances, or is that something perhaps we should be looking at to provide further oversight and clarification, or perhaps a reasonable guardrail to ensure this is not abused?
Mr. Duncan, I'm going to interrupt briefly because I see Ms. Pereira has her hand up.
I apologize.
No, that's okay, but she may want to speak to your question. So, Mr. Knight, we're just going to pause, go to Ms. Pereira, at which point, if you feel you have something to add, certainly the floor is yours at that point. Ms. Pereira, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add to Mr. Duncan's question that it is at the request of the elector. So the elector is the one who does need to ask, typically their friend or relative, or in this case, a long-term care health worker in the facility. So that there is that measure. I do understand the point that Mr. Duncan is making, and it's a good one, but it is at the request of the elector, not just someone who can go in and offer to help electors.
Okay, I see the point and the clarification there, Ms. Pereira. I appreciate that, but I don't want to split here, but I just want to get a clarification that if I'm going door to door in a long-term care setting, or even in a community where there's an advanced poll, either or, the broader context or issue here is that I could say at the door of the resident, okay, you just have to, I'll come down with you, and you just tell them that you've requested some help and I'm here to help you. Would that not suffice as asking for help? The interaction that I would have, and I'll use my name, I'll malign myself here, so I'm not maligning anybody else's intentions, but I knock on the door, oh, I'm not sure, well, I can actually go and help you and vote. Whenever I bring you down to the table, you just tell them that I want, I'm looking for, I need some help and Mr. Duncan's going to help me. Is that considered enough for requesting assistance?
Typically, and my colleague may be able to confirm, but the elector asks their immediate relative or their friend, I would like your help, because they're a trusted person. They're assured that that person's not going to share how they voted in the ballot box or influence them in any way. So they do seek the person close to them to have that assistance in the ballot box. It is possible that someone goes and proactively says, would you like my help? But they would likely have someone in mind close to them, like their personal support worker or a friend or relative, to help them mark their ballot if needed.
Well, I'll just, I get more comments or more questions about this and more concern. I mean, I understand the intent and the well-meaning, perhaps. I won't suggest in this section that that's not something that's trying to get more people to be able to cast a ballot. But I also think this is opening the door significantly to abuse. And it would not maybe be the intention, but that's what we have to do in policy work that we do is acknowledge this. I think somebody, a political party representative that can go and say, I'm friends with everybody. In Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry, I'm very fortunate to know a lot of people and be friends with a lot of people, and was a former mayor in a community before, so everyone's my friend, quote unquote, and during an election, particularly when they're eager to go cast a ballot. So the relationship there, and I would just say, as I kind of, I'll cede the floor here, but the one thing I will say is that perhaps capping, so as opposed to having an unlimited number, right now, there's specific restrictions, but even going to say assisting up to 5 people or something like that does give some flexibility, but suddenly doesn't have somebody going and assisting 50 people. I'm just very worried about the open-endedness of this, the connection that there's no restrictions on political candidates or political party representatives or scrutineers.
Point of order.
I've got a point of order from Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just noticing that there's some repetition, and so I thought it might be a good opportunity for me to be able to bring forward a unanimous consent if I could. I mean, clearly the Conservatives have very important questions and has nothing to do with stalling this bill, but I wanted to request to put forward, the Conservatives have brought up their concerns around the part of the bill that benefits MP pensions, which I've also brought forward.
You can't do a UC during
Guys, I know.
So you're going to allow a UC during a point of order when they're not allowed?
Guys, I said I know. And give me a moment to speak, please, Mr. Duncan. Ms. Barron, the rules do not permit for a motion to be moved on a point of order, so unfortunately we can't entertain that at this point in time. But if you had the floor, that would be different, and I would be happy to add you to the speaking list if you'd like me to.
Thank you, Chair. I was merely trying to resolve an issue that they had and trying to get creative with it. So thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Ms.
Certainly, I'll try to find other ways to bring forward getting the Conservatives to support removing the portion of the bill that takes out the pensions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. Mr. Duncan, the floor remains yours.
Thank you, and thank Ms. Barron for trying to bring forward her issue that the NDP and Liberals certainly have. Nice try. So I'll just wrap up my question again is, as I'd mentioned before and lost my conclusion there, is, I'll ask just to comment about capping. Could that be a reasonable compromise to cap the number of individuals one elector could help to try to make sure we don't have 40 or 50 people do that?
Go ahead, Mr. Knight. Yep.
I think from the perspective of Elections Canada, that's a policy choice that absolutely is within the scope of this committee's work. I don't think we would have a comment on that.
But would be doable, permitted if this committee did consider that. That would be with it permissible and manageable from an Elections Canada perspective. Not putting you formally on the spot, but if there's any red flags that are raised from being able to enforce this or being able to manage that.
I don't see any concerns with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.